so often in digital transformation, you're trying to get to an absolutely flexible environment around which you can go faster. Well, you can't measure speed in that way. What you can see is this universe of people with that piece are moving faster. And define what moving faster is, not the could you just move faster. E is for effort, which is just above F.
I love that.
So we're excited to get into it today. We're going to start talking about transformations, technology transformations, and talking a little bit about what that right balance is between technology and humans, and what are those characteristics that you need for success. So we've got Kat joining us today. We're super excited. So just like we start every episode, we're going to get right into the data. So let's get started.
Got it.
All right, let's do it. So for every dollar they spend on AI, companies should be spending about $9. How do you guys feel about that?
$9 in human capital and culture change
yes.
in your world.
Or just $9 in general. Just $9 on anything they want.
I like that.
Wardrobe?
Yeah, it could be. I think I need an upgrade on. No, that doesn't. It doesn't surprise me that that's what the data is saying. But I mean, you've taught me how important the tech. Here's the admission of a tech guy. The tech is the hard part of a transformation.
Is it?
I mean,
I would say that's the easy part.
Yeah, it's not the hard part. I'm saying.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's like that's a defined problem that we can, and tech's changing, but if you can't get right what it means to your people and the process, like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think this was true in previous transformations in technology waves. It's even more true with AI, because AI is happening so fast in our consumer lives. But if we don't invest in the people in the enterprise, like the technology is moving so much faster than the organization's ability to adopt it. So I think the organizations that ignore the importance of the people, the adoption in this AI wave are already being left behind if they don't realize it yet, but will be left further behind.
And what's interesting is AI transformations, there's a stat out there that says 97% of AI transformations are stalling, because they haven't really thought about what the impacts are to the work, right? The work design and all of that.
And the danger, I think that narrative, and we saw the study over the summer around that 95% of AI investments don't have value and impact. Like the danger becomes, well, the tech's not ready. I would argue the tech is ready, and even if it doesn't have a single bit of advancement coming, it's still enough that we could transform literally every industry. But it's how you do it. And it's easy to put the tech as the scapegoat. It's like a therapy session for me. I like this. When in reality, it's what you're doing with it and how you're doing it, and more importantly, the so what and the why you're doing with it.
I mean, as the CTO, we'd expect you to say that the tech is ready, but in this case, I actually agree with you.
But it's not the most important part for the record.
Is the business ready? Is the organization ready? I 100% agree, and I think we're going to dive deep into that today with one of the leaders that's done many of these transformations.
Totally.
Yeah, and hopefully she'll talk to us a little bit about her experience with the workforce, right? How do you bring the workforce in? How do you co-create with them? How do you think about investing those $9 in the right way? So super exciting. Let's see. Another fun one here. We've got more than 67% of leaders believe it's important to customize design and experience of work, right? That's, how are you dealing with worker skills, behavior, and patterns, motivations, those types of things.
But only 7%,
only 7% of leaders are taking action.
That disconnect is astounding.
That feels like a problem.
67% believe it's important, only 7% are actually taking action.
Look at your line here. 97% of the AI transformation efforts are failing, and we have a stat that only 7% are actually taking action on something the vast majority know in here is one of the most important things to focus on.
Feels like the answer might be staring in our face.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So the people or the organizations that get that balance correct, the technology and the human, how do you capitalize on that human edge? Those are going to be the ones that win.
Yeah, and I think part of this too is it's easy to make the AI transformation this big amorphous thing. In the places we're seeing real success is where they're starting small and it's focused, where you can actually get the buy-in of the population that matters, and eventually that it's probably going to grow and be expansive across the enterprise. But when you go at it top down and you haven't created any real guardrails of what it is, why it matters, what you're doing, it makes it really hard to bring anyone along the journey, much less prove value.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I feel like we are all saying the same thing, but I haven't really seen action.
Yeah, right. Maybe we can inspire everyone listening today.
I feel like Kat's going to do this. She's going to.
I think she's going to give us some insights, both from history and what she's seeing today in the boardroom. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. We are so excited to have an amazing individual here with us today. We've got Karenann, a former CIO at GlaxoSmithKline, Mercedes Chrysler. What am I missing?
Walmart.
Yeah.
How could I forget Walmart? Little Walmart.
Is that a startup with a forum? Yeah.
But even more impressive, she's a pilot. She's a pilot, she's a swimmer, she's an amazing advocate for women in technology. So we are super excited and happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
So let's get into it. Right. Okay. So we hear a lot about AI and these massive transformations that are happening. One of the things that we keep hearing is about the amount of money that's being spent on the technology side of the equation, right? I think the stat is there's about 93% of budget is spent on the technology and only 7% is spent on the human side of it. Wow. So talk to me a little bit about, given all the experience you've had, does that sound right to you?
It sounds like the statistic is right, but whether the answer is right.
Accurate, but not
exactly.
Correct, yeah.
You know what? I think the transformation in technology, where it has really been driven by technologists, they just get the lion's share of the conversation that takes place with the board. Mm-hmm. They are running, for the most part, the change management aspects of that. So you have to just stop and think. People who were classically trained in engineering, computer science, project management, those types of things, are not top of mind thinking about change management, people, and adoption and adaption of just behavior and habits. So I think the stat doesn't surprise me. I think when you are in transformative times, when we were in digital transformation within companies, and now as we head into the AI revolution of everything associated with work, I think we're really going to have to rethink that. And whether budget is the right way to think about what the right answer is, right. I would argue maybe that's not the KPI. But we certainly have got to have a much more two-in-a-box mentality where the people leader and the technology leader in advancing transformation have equal parts of accountability, responsibility, and effort.
Okay. So let me ask you really quick on that. In the rooms that you are in, right? I know you're on many boards, but does the conversation around work design come in when you're talking about the technology transformations? Like, is that part of the debate?
I am super blessed in the board context to sit side by side with operating CEOs, as well as former CEOs, and they bring to the table, can we talk about people and the change that's going to take place? They already have lived through and, show their scars on a constant basis of what they have been through previously. So I think it does come up in industrial companies. I'm on a power management board. That conversation is front and center because you've got to distribute all the way through factories, the change and change management that you have. When you're sitting in a much more either technology-related company, sometimes we can forget that white-collar workers need that same love and attention on change management. So I would say I'm blessed in a boardroom because CEOs have seen it and lived it.
Yeah.
All right, so you hit before on the people and the technology. We've started to see, like Moderna and Tracy Franklin is the chief people digital technology officer. They brought HR and technology together. Do you think that trend, I think a piece of it is if we have more and more AI and agentic, it is not just pieces of the tech workload, they're more like co-workers and we're truly redesigning work. We have to think about a different culture. We've got to think about what learning development looks like, performance management in this mix. Do you think that's is that a one-off or is that something we'll see more of?
It's funny when you think of how corporations and enterprises usually think of people change and technology change, they think of it more as people change here and technology change here, and you're on a slider somewhere in between. In fact, it's like a semantic differential, right? It's these things are both moving, where you're pegged at max people and you're pegged at max technology, instead of we're trying to balance between the two. So I'm not sure if the leader structure, and this is the place at which I had a tremendous learning about real transformative change requires that you think about the culture of the company, how the culture of the company actually has arisen, and you actually follow the culture change, you put your change into the culture side of things. So in the place where you have to have one leader to do all, that says a lot more about the culture of Humana than the culture of a large retailer, where that's very grassroots, and it requires everyone all the time to be engaged and involved in that. So I think the culture piece, we don't like to talk about it because it feels very airy-fairy and squishy, soft. But boy, you have got to be a study of the culture that you're in.
I love that.
Very clearly to follow it for change.
I love that because you're actually talking about it in a different lens, right? Most people are like, oh, you have to have this type of culture for success. But the truth is, you've got to study because every culture is different. And you really have to adapt to what that culture is and make the right decisions based on it. It's great culture.
Picking up on culture, a big part of culture is leadership, and I know you're passionate about mentoring the next generation of technology leaders. You've lived through and led many technology cycles in your career. What's different about AI, and what are the implications for the engineering and more technology-oriented leaders today? I think most of whom in large organizations are over the age of 40.
Yeah.
Are
they are.
I have no comment.
Me neither. I'm way over 40. But you know, technologists, engineers, we come from a mindset of expert mindset. And that means that we've sat in a lot of seats. We don't hop around from discipline to discipline. There's a very, very clear expertise that is a very deep vein. It's actually who we are. I think we select engineering and computer science for those reasons. We're just, from the womb, we were like that.
I feel very seen right now, Kat.
Oh, thank you. It was very cathartic for me to actually admit that to myself, because leadership in the age, and where you are doing that, and AI organizations, I don't think are going to be led the same way as technology organizations have been led, because you have very, very strong technical leaders at the top where people look to them for vision, have them engaged and involved. It's I used to, when I was working, differentiate myself between engineer cat and boss cat. Because boss cat and engineer cat, I had to just get into the details at some point or I was just going to lose it. In the age of AI, when you are operating there, this is an ensemble play. No one has the right answers. You have got to put people around you that have very different skill sets and capabilities and are not necessarily the people that have moved in the organization to be the expert. In fact, the more you think of looking up as an expert for the answers, the less likely you're going to be to have the right level of agility to change when things don't work. Because the right answer is the one that you implement with a big program and project. AI is not leading us directionally that way. Things are just changing. The tech changes too fast, and definitely the results that are happening in the organization, whether we are moving at the speed that our boards and our bosses are asking us. So I think it's a much more ensemble.
So what is your number one piece of advice you give to that tech leader who may have grown up in the era where they were looked to for that expertise and now they need to change?
So my personal go-to tactic is I always ask, who's your reverse mentor?
Love that.
I love that.
And let me tell you, I've had to describe a reverse mentor in great detail to people who are experts, which is, so let me get this right. Some kid that's building something in his garage in my organization, I'm going to reach in to mentor me. And I said, at your peril, you don't do it.
Right.
Right.
And when that happens, when a CEO does that, when a chief people officer does that, to reach into people who really are more native and further along on their understanding, I think that there is a change in the environment. Instead of the, I am the all-knowing, it becomes I am the all-learning. And I know that Microsoft likes to talk about the be a learner. In this age, leaders inside of tech organizations and companies have got to embody that. And reverse mentoring is just one tactic, but I love it.
Play those last two things back together. So this broad transformation with AI and technology changing quickly, the playbook that for the last 30 years we would run, where part of it was we've done this before, we've seen it before. We've done a process-based finance transformation. Pick your tech
Playbook.
platform.
Here's the playbook.
Here's exactly, and even consultants, we'd come in and say, we've got 90% of the answer because we've done it a million times. Flip it on its head now. We're saying, hey, the future's unknowable. If we allow how we've always done things to be the constraint limiting us to how we think about tomorrow, incrementalism has a pretty low ceiling.
Yep.
But that requires not only the mindset of learning, but there's a humility, I think, in a tech leader, and the need to create. I mean, how much is the vision, the roadmap, and the ability to tell that story and build the confidence up and down? Where does that fall in your mixing board?
Humility is a very two-edged sword because humility in the right culture, fantastic.
Yep.
Because it's about us, it's not about me and all of that. So I do agree with that. But that element of humility makes a huge vulnerability in somebody who comes at it from an expert mindset.
Right.
I think the learner is actually the more accurate side of that, which is, I'm not going to know all that there is to know in this. I am, and that curiosity, I think, is supremely important for a leader to exhibit and to expect, because otherwise you are holding fast to a paradigm which is changing faster. So that is so dangerous for your company and your career.
Yeah, you think it's a life wrap, but it's actually an anvil.
Because you're trying to be confident.
Yeah.
You're trying to show a level of confidence in the plan. And by the way, the really, really sticky part, I think, for leaders who are in this is, and they're screaming at the podcast right now saying, but Kat, I still have to deliver the modernization that is in place. Absolutely. And I'm sorry, but it's a world of and.
Yeah.
And
I can picture comments from folks that have worked with you before saying, hey, where was this in 1992?
Yeah. But it is one of those things that you, walking and chewing gum at the same time is the minimum requirement to be successful, not the one that's going to make you ultimately successful. Because I think we already had to, do those things in managing for the business as well as managing the technology. Now there's a transformation going on between technology and the business, which you are at least a co-owner for. If you're on the people side of things, where you were in charge of the administration of people, you're looking at, labor relations, you're doing all of those things. Well, sitting on your plate today is that ownership between you and technology to actually drive the AI revolution in your company.
So we talk a lot about the leaders, right? And this kind of shift from experts to fluency to agility and all those things. Let's talk a little bit about how do we engage the workforce, right? How do we engage those reverse mentors to co-create with us? What's some advice there?
I must want to pick up on AI fluency, because I'm old enough to know what it was like when people didn't really understand the internet or mobile devices in the workplace. And the only thing that I found across all successful companies that I adapted and adopted to the cultures of the company I worked on is you have got to basically dump into the organization the ability to use those sets of tools. The thing is, everybody talks about Gen AI, but when you actually eyeball to eyeball say, what is your everyday tool? And do you talk to it? And do you have a long context window? Do you have a long conversation with it? And I think we in companies have got to actually smother the organization with the environment around AI before we can expect really emergent behavior, like the $3 trillion that we have on productivity improvement and augmentation of knowledge and first drafting and all of those great things, that's $3 trillion. There's another $10 trillion coming on the outside of reinvention of work, brand new companies that we've never seen. If you are not smothering your organization in some way with fluency, however that works inside your culture, you're done for, because you're never getting outside the $3 trillion, and you're going really slow inside the inside circle, which we know has value.
Yeah, so I'd love to pick up. So we're in this AI moment, right? We just covered a lot of ground. Yeah, it turns out it's a thing.
It's not going away.
It's not going away. I'd love to get your vantage point, though, because not every organization is at the same starting point, right? You led multiple organizations as a CIO in multiple industries. You sit on multiple boards in multiple industries now, too. But like, not every organization is at the same starting point. There was this thing called digital transformation that was happening when AI kind of showed up here in a big way. Not every organization got through their digital transformation. I'd love your perspective on that. Like, when you look at different orgs, like, their starting point in this AI revolution makes a difference, I think, right?
It does. And so the good news on that is that AI tooling is actually helping to speed the undone digital transformation. And there are very few companies across the globe that can say, done and dusted on the digital transformation, because that kind of digital transformation always has lower prioritized things that need to get done. And so I think a lot of companies are very early in the digital transformation. They may have a cloud strategy, and now they're thinking, oh my gosh, in the cloud strategy, do I need to bring my data back in-house because of AI? That's okay. That's the evolution of a digital transformation, is that you actually don't have done and dusted decisions. But it's, unfortunately, in the boardroom and in the executive committee, the shiny bright toy of generative AI that has emerged and feels very consequential to the valuation of the company if you're in the public market is getting a lot more attention than that old, nasty, dusty
that boring
digital transformation.
stuff.
You know, gosh, do we really have to talk about cybersecurity on multiple planes? And the answer is yes. But as I say, the great news is there are some amazing products that are actually being developed in the AI world to help with mainframe modernization, with the move into the cloud, on all of those things. We're not dependent totally on discrete technology and its constraints.
This is a bone. So I love that we went here, because I'm in a lot of boardrooms with chairs and the directors and even the C-suite that thought, finally, this moment meant all of that stuff. We don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
And I love your perspective on, as we talk about AI embedded in the transformation, agentic as it moves forward, those things, I think, matter more than ever. Good news is there's new techniques to go after them. So it's not going to be a 5-year, 9, 10, 11 figure. But have you seen that play out in your travels?
So I'm going to put my, truth hat on as a board member. We get some amnesia about how much there is still to go as the new curve emerges. This is why I am so grateful to see technologists in the boardroom and not just non-technologists, because technologists are like, hey, can we wait here a second? Because we're not quite finished on this piece. Are we sure that we have this secured? Are we moving? Those discussions don't really take place unless someone who knows the reality of technology
is there. Scars here versus here, but it hasn't lived experience on it. Yeah.
It is.
You guys have been in boardrooms I haven't.
I know. I'm like,
I was so lucky in my boardrooms because we had some stellar technologists who, I found myself in a board meeting going, what he said, that's right. But
did you ever do a full amen?
But I'll tell you, most boardrooms are not like that.
Yeah.
Or if they are, and we've got to get better as technologists being business leaders in the boardroom, that's another whole podcast. But in those conversations, I think that it emerges in the tech or the innovation committees. And that is what I find has to be imported into the boardroom, because the boardroom is where priorities around budgets are made decisions, not over in the innovation committee.
Can you imagine as a board director if you said, I'm not the risk person, I can't think about enterprise risk?
No.
I mean, it would be ludicrous,
No.
right? But yet that happens with, well, that's the tech committee's responsibility. Right?
It is, but it's also the responsibility of the tech person, just the way I, as a CIO, need to know my limitations and lift myself through a reverse mentor.
Yeah.
It's a bit of the job of the technologist to say, hey, how can I help you guys with AI?
Yeah.
How can I help you understand the piece on all that? Because they're not 40. They might have another 20 years on that 40, and that is a really different demographic to actually get comfortable with new generative AI capabilities. A lot of them, the Gen AI world grew up post their operating lives. That can be really scary when you're sitting on a board.
By the way, there's a few different podcasts that I want to do just based on this little conversation that we've
got
had.
season 2
So,
and 3 covered. Right?
So I do want to try to get to two quick things. We don't have a ton of time, but I do want to get to two quick. You've done so many transformations in your amazing career. Talk a little bit about maybe one that stalled, and why did it stall, and what did you do to get it unstuck?
Yeah, I think that the lesson learned about follow the culture stalled almost all of the transformations.
Interesting.
So it may look from the outside as a glorified PR story of we went straight up and to the right. But I think until you recognize that, you know, my one-hit wonder was I'm screaming for sponsorship of all of this. Well, okay, the companies I worked in didn't need that kind of sponsorship. They actually needed a whole set of linked arms because that's how they got anything done at scale. And so I think it's when you are asking people about transformation, you ask them how the transformation is following the culture. And if they can't answer that question, then they're lucky by serendipity that things are going well. Because I think they're definitely not going at the speed that they could. It's about recognizing and honoring how work gets done in a company. But I think the other really big stall tactic is when we were measuring the wrong thing.
I was going to ask that specifically.
Yeah.
So how often did you see conflating activity for progress?
For sure.
Or outcomes and
Yeah.
impact, yeah?
Yeah, E is for effort, which is just above F.
I love that. I'm going to tell my kids that.
But it is, it's the outcome that you should be trying to measure, and you should be really thoughtful about the outcome that you look and the early stage changes that you're looking for internally. So I think so often in digital transformation, you're trying to get to an absolutely flexible environment around which you can go faster. Well, you can't measure speed in that way. What you can see is this universe of people with that piece are moving faster. And define what moving faster is, not the could you just move faster. There is a moving faster in procurement, which is different than it is in HR or finance.
Bounded but measurable.
It is.
In real ways that actually matter to the business.
And talk
Yeah.
very clearly of that is the outcome, and this is on the trajectory of that outcome, so that people in the boardroom, people in the executive committee, and the direct reports of whoever is executing on this say, when we see this thing move, when it's not moving, there's no chance for the end to happen. But talk about that
I'm
all the
sorry.
I know,
I know,
It's gotta
but,
go.
but the thing is, is there also like that's the direction, but also we recognize it's like the stock ticker that we're going to have ups and downs of volatility as we learn and grow and hit things we didn't expect and couldn't know.
Yeah.
But the macro, like that macro trend line is the game in a way.
It is.
Yeah.
Transformation
Yeah.
is different than change management in one characteristic
Okay.
that I have ever seen. And
Are we
that
listening?
is
Are we listening? Are we zooming in?
when you are in a change management, there's 1,000 items that have to be moved and there's interdependencies. In transformation, when you are actually working on something, it is radically important to pick the first right thing. Because when it moves, the next 4 things are moving. And when you have picked the wrong thing,
Yeah.
it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. In transformation, when you move something, it moves a whole set of other things. And every transformation is different. Every AI prioritization, as you look at what should we pick, you are looking, this is a transformative element. And it's not about hearts and minds always. Sometimes it is about EBITDA improvement because that's what's happening. But if you don't see things get easier after the first step in transformation, you picked wrong. And that's okay. Pick again.
This is incredible. While we're talking about transformations, I want to pick your brain about being a future seeker. If we're here in 5 years, a lot of the discussion around AI right now is about productivity. Do you think that's what we're going to be talking about in 5 years? Or are we going to be talking about business model reimagination, growth? Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years?
3 years ago, we had never heard the word generative AI, and 89% of everyone, doesn't matter what strata you are in, knows what generative AI is. And if we have moved in 3 years like that, I believe we will be out of the reward structure for productivity improvement, and we will be into the next generation of the change of work. I think, somebody asked me once, what is the most transformative thing that you have seen that you think is going to change work in general? The building of data scientists, agents, that sit here on every single shoulder. Today, if everyone had that capability, they would start reinventing what the work is that they would do. When that type of capability, I think, starts to enter, in 5 years, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about our mobile devices at the edge, catching my voice and all my information and me using it more in a personal assistant. I think those things are what change.
Well, and if I'm hearing you correctly, in the big debate that's going on, is AI replacement or amplification? It sounds like you're on the amplification side of human endeavor and ingenuity.
Did mobile help or amplify? The entirety of the real world enterprise that exists today would not exist without mobile. Nobody knew that in the beginning. Everybody was like, oh, I have a phone that I can walk around with. But
by the way, my 9-year-old still has that reaction, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
So this is amazing. Thank you so much. I do want to, in closing, as a woman in this field, as a technologist, I think what got us here may not be what gets us to whatever that next step is. Yeah. What advice do you have for our women leaders out there?
Any women that are sitting in senior leadership positions, and I'll just kind of start there, have already fought through an awful lot. And that expert mindset, especially in and around technology and more technical things, have had to been rock solid. Or in the fight, there wouldn't have been there. And make sure, as a woman, that is not your identity. Because in this world, it is about the power that you give away in order to actually help drive much bigger and broader changes. And I think men will have to learn that lesson, but we as women have a big opportunity to actually just look at our own leadership styles of what got us here. Because what's going to get us there is two-in-the-box thinking about how this is affecting people and valuation changes for our company. Those are way different discussions than the expert mindset that we grew with. And I think you've got to just really examine your own leadership style to see how much of that expert you have embedded into that's who I am, and make sure that you're ready for the future. That's my advice to women.
Thank you.
Kat, you are the GOAT. I mean,
that's
truly.
awesome.
And I can't wait for my digital Tom Hagen. I'm a film buff. So I have that kind of similarity there in The Godfather. Robert Duvall's character ready to help everything.
I go Angel.
Yeah.
I go Angel.
Okay, either way. I'm a good Catholic. That's good too. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Want to keep the conversation going? Connect with us on LinkedIn. Brett Davis, Bill Briggs, and Simona Spelman. We share research, perspectives, and what we're seeing across the market between episodes. Tag us with your biggest takeaways, and we'll join the discussion.
That was a great conversation. I am so energized.
Phenomenal.
Right?
I mean, truly a legend.
I think you said the GOAT.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very few leaders who have been through what she's been through and been so successful.
And still, like it would be easy to rest, like think about all the places she's been, the transformation, lasting impact that's been made, and still out helping all kinds of companies on their boards with startups going, like
And
across industries. I mean,
that's the even more amazing part. It wasn't the same industry over and over again. It was every industry.
And did I mention she's a pilot, right? That's
Yeah. Did you see my restraint? I wanted to pull the thread so badly, and I sat here on my hands. It's okay.
So let's get into the headlines, right? I'm reading an article here from CIO.com. 8 reasons why digital transformations still fail.
Should we pick our favorites?
Yeah, pick your favorite.
Yeah, not dealing with the data. You guys know this is one of my, like the fact that AI, genius in, genius out, garbage in, garbage squared. So we got to get the data right. We've got to fix the core modernization problem behind it. Think about infrastructure, like all the things below the line. But the important thing is not for the entire enterprise. It's really focused and bounded on the places where we're trying to get more immediate impact. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Bill kind of stole mine, and it was Kat touched on that, and you got very excited, And I do think a lot of the digital transformations are not over, so I do agree that's important. But I also, the one that jumps out at me, given the conversation we had with Kat in particular, is
Don't steal mine.
Overlooking the importance of goals and metrics.
Okay, no.
No, but I think this is so important. She highlighted it, right? And getting the KPIs right, especially that first one, that really stuck with me. Like that first motion gets the rest of the transformation in motion. So overlooking the importance of goals and metrics, I think, is super important to make sure these transformations don't fail, particularly in an age of AI.
Yeah.
All right, Simona, what's your favorite?
As the chief human officer, for me, it's ineffective communication. Right? You've got to communicate often, constantly. And, I think sometimes we overlook how much we have to communicate with the workforce, right? You think about it, because leaders are in rooms, they just assume that everybody else knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I think
your telepathy hasn't developed.
Exactly.
You have to be able to communicate.
Right. So we make assumptions because we are in rooms, but part of being a leader is really communicating to the workforce, but also amplifying what's important to the workforce. So that's that two-way communication. So this actually really hit home for me.
Well, that may be my new favorite now. As you were saying that, I was reflecting on the conversation with Kat. Like, yes, communication is important.
You don't have to steal hers because I stole yours.
Okay. I'm going to steal them all. But no, but communication in the context of culture, right? Kat said, communication from the top sometimes works. Sometimes it's middle out, and sometimes it's bottoms up. But at every level, communication is key, and you have to know your culture. That really stuck with me as well.
Next time, we're looking ahead at the future of aviation for passengers, commercial, the government, and beyond. We'll examine how shifting expectations, AI, and a new aircraft design are forcing a rethink of the entire travel system and what lessons extend far beyond aviation. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I think I've said amazing 1,000 times today, but that was such an inspiring conversation with Kat. Our future is bright, especially with people like Kat in the boardrooms that matter the most to us. So don't bet on the future, build it. Until next time. This podcast is produced by Deloitte. The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Deloitte. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, go to deloitte.com/about. This publication contains general information only, and Deloitte is not, by means of this publication, rendering accounting, business, financial, investment, legal, tax, or other professional advice or services. This publication is not a substitute for such professional advice or services, nor should it be used as a basis for any decision or action that may affect your business. Before making any decision or taking any action that may affect your business, you should consult a qualified professional advisor. Deloitte shall not be responsible for any loss sustained by any person who relies on this publication.